Hi, I'm Maestro Mike. I'm the music director of the Westlake Village Symphony, and I'd like to invite you to hear our performance of Beethoven's First Symphony. Before you listen to it, I wanted to give you a couple things to be aware of and listen for in the music. For starters, Beethoven studied with Haydn, who was the premier symphonic composer prior to Beethoven. Haydn wrote 104 symphonies, and Haydn was known for having a very wry sense of musical humor. So Haydn would put things in his symphonies that to a classical musician would almost be laughing out loud. For example, in his Farewell Symphony, the story behind that is that the musicians wanted a vacation and the prince wouldn't give it to them. So Haydn wrote a symphony in which the musicians one by one get up at the end of the last movement and walk off stage to give the prince the hint that, hey, we want to go home for a vacation, and it worked. So that's the kind of humor that Beethoven was trained in. Maybe not directly, but he certainly picked it up from Haydn. So now in this First Symphony of Beethoven, of course everyone knows Beethoven's Fifth, and everyone knows Beethoven's Ninth with the Ode to Joy. But it all started in 1800 with the First Symphony. And one of the great things about Beethoven is he's always pushing boundaries and he's always breaking the rules. So even in his very first symphony, there's something funny at the beginning, but you don't know it unless you analyze the music, and that is that the piece is billed as Symphony Number 1 in C major. You would expect the first chord to be a C major chord. No. Beethoven gives you what we call in music a C dominant seventh chord, which is the wrong chord because it leads to an F major chord. So literally from the very first chord, he's playing with your expectations and he's thwarting them, because he's literally starting his symphony in C major on the wrong chord, which I think, to me, is really funny. So when you hear the opening of the symphony, it's a very slow introduction, and you'll hear it start with this chord, which leads you on a little bit of a chord progression before you get to the key of C major. Another thing you'll hear in this movement and the last movement is a bit of solo playing by the first violins, which, to me, I imagine it like Beethoven's actually talking to us. He's talking to the audience. And he's sort of inviting you in to listen, or maybe he's telling you a little something directly, but it's almost like when an actor breaks the fourth wall and they're on stage and then they say to the audience, wink, wink, and then they come back to the play. So Beethoven kind of does this in the beginning of the symphony, and it's a way that he leads in from the slow introduction into the first section, or the allegro of the first movement. Now in the fourth movement, this comes back much more directly, and it almost reminds me of the beginning of the last movement of the Ninth Symphony, where Beethoven has this huge solo part for the cellos, and it's sort of like Beethoven's talking to you. Well, in the beginning of the last movement of this symphony, he starts off with a big, ominous G. So you think, oh, this is really serious. Something's gonna happen, something bad. And then, in his Haydn-esque way, he goes, dun, da-dum, da-dun, da-dun. He's got this little line in the violins that sort of ascends and goes up, and it's as if he's talking to you and saying, hey, check this out, something fun's gonna happen next, and then goes right on into the allegro tempo of the last movement. So if you can listen for that sort of musical humor throughout the piece, it'll sort of inform how you view it, and maybe not take it so seriously, but have a little more fun with it.